So, hello this evening. My name is Lisa Keeton, and we are here to discuss a book that I've written. It's called The Flip Side. And the flip side is about some lesser known characters in the Bible and some of the things that they have possibly gone through emotionally and how they dealt with their life and how their life can help us deal with where we're at right now in our life. So I have a couple of friends here who are here to help me, and we're going to have a discussion. One is Janine Davis, and the other is Alex Litton. And they are here both to help me and guide me. And we are going to both all give some insight into how the book is written and what it's about. So we're going to start out with Janine asking a question, and then we will go from there.
Okay, hello. So I want to ask a couple of questions about the chapter called I See Me. So, just to kind of give a little bit of backstory about the chapter, this chapter is about Jonathan and his kind of love, relationship, friendship bond with um, David, who he just, kind of fell in love with as a brother. And just it just so happens that his father Saul was in direct opposition to David, but Jonathan found himself kind of fighting for David in the sense. But
Yes.
part of the chapter that kind of drew me was the segments on rejection. And so one of the questions that I have for you is, how do you handle rejection? What's the Christian way to handle rejection? I think every one of us has experienced some level of rejection at some point.
And that is very true. We all have experienced some form of rejection. The Christian way to handle rejection really and truly is, I think, in my personal opinion, is to go back and seek God and ask Him how you should deal with different things. Because it's not always what happens to us, is usually how we respond to it. And in your prayer with God and spending time with Him, let Him shape you and mold you and not allow the rejection to shape and to mold you, especially if rejection comes at an early age. And that's kind of hard as a child to be able to know that you should go to God and seek Him for how you should be developed. But even as we get older and we run across those things, or even if it happened to us in childhood and we have it still dealing with it as an adult, um, we should seek God and we should ask Him, you know what, Lord, how do I deal with this? How do I not allow this to keep coming up to the surface and me feeling this? Or even if you do come up to the surface and I do feel it, how do I respond to it so it's not in a negative light or it's not in a negative way, or, I'm not feeling personally attacked or personally put down or, hurt to my soul. And I can learn how to still continue to love people even when they're not always good to me.
Yeah, and I think that's the difficult part about rejection. I think it's so hard not to take it personally, not to really react to it in a negative way. So I think what you said about praying and really kind of anchoring yourself with God in prayer is key to um, handling rejection in a godly manner. Now, Alex, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, I think what you said pretty much kind of covered it. And um, I guess people go through, your own journeys of how you deal with it. So like you said, some people it happens in childhood, some people it happens in adulthood. So knowing, how to deal with it depending on when it has happened to you as well. So
Well,
that's the only thing I would add.
that kind of brings up another question, like, do you think that whether you experience rejection as a child or as an adult matters? Like, do you think that that makes a difference how you deal with it or how you take it? Or is rejection just rejection?
I think when you deal with rejection as a child, that it could be in the root of you or in deep down buried in your soul to the point of where you sometimes don't even recognize how you are responding to it. It's just the automatic because this is how you automatically dealt with it over and over and over again in life. And it became a habit. I think as an adult, because when I experienced rejection as an adult, I was already settled with who I was and where I was at in life. And it didn't have an impact on changing me because I knew this is what I'm going to do. This is where I'm going to be. And I was settled with where I wanted to be and what I want to do. So I think it can have a different impact when you're a child and coming up, and it grows with you rather than if you experience it as an adult.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think for me as an early learning professional, I always tell teachers and parents that, we're setting the foundation for
Yes.
children will become in the future. So if no one ever teaches a child how to deal with rejection, then they will kind of internalize that and develop their own ways to cope and own ways
Yes.
to deal with rejection. And that may be right or wrong, the right or wrong way to deal with it. So I think you're absolutely right that, when you experience rejection as a child, if you're not taught how to deal with it, it can become the core of you. You kind of live your life expecting rejection or looking for it, seeking it out.
That's true.
Else, Alex, did you want to add to that?
Just that when you do experience it as a child, if it's something that you experience and I can't articulate, because when you're younger, you may not know that that's what it is. And then maybe, growing up with that. And then as you've gotten older, you finally realize like what that thing is. But when you experience it as a kid, you see it from a totally different perspective. And sometimes it does take you growing up and going through other things to kind of look back on that experience and see it in a new light and understand of like, okay, that's what I was experiencing, or that's what I was feeling. Because, when you're young, you may not have words to articulate it, but as you get older and you grow more in the word and in your journey with God, he will kind of like shed light on that experience for you and give you that different perspective so that you understand like, okay, this is what you experienced. But, going back to what Sister King said, it's now like having that new perspective of that experience and growing from that.
And I think one other thing too that's good, especially as we are adults, is setting boundaries for people and letting them know, you know what, I recognize what this is, and I know that I need to put guards up around how far you can come into my life or how far you have influence into my life, because that just protects you. And that is the godly thing, because we all have to guard our hearts. And so I think that's very important that we learn that as adults. And if we could teach that to children, that would be a blessing.
Absolutely. And I think also another point to that is when you're setting these boundaries, you're also setting and sticking to these boundaries yourself as well, because it's easy to set a boundary for someone else, but those boundaries that we set for ourselves are so hard to stick to, so hard to keep. So that is a very good point that you made. And so I'm pretty long-winded, so I don't want to take up too much of our time. So I went to the next question. So in the book, you talk about how David was somewhat thrown into his position. He really, when we think about his situation with Goliath, he was just doing the job that his father told him to do, just bring this food down to the soldiers, and
Right.
happened to be in that place to where attention was drawn to him and he was able to slay Goliath. And he had similar situations throughout his life to where he was just kind of thrown into something. And so, do you think that how you start something affects how you engage in it, or how you start something, should that affect how you engage in a thing?
Well, when you're starting something, say for instance, like me, writing this book, it was not something that I planned. It wasn't something that I intended to do. It wasn't, so it was something that I was just kind of thrown in, and God threw me in. I didn't throw myself in. And so, I mean, it just takes much prayer. To me, I just had to keep praying. I had to go back, and it took a lot of work. It took a lot of research. And so you're not necessarily, maybe getting involved in something that you really had a passion for or that you really wanted to do, but God has opened up this door. And if he opens up that door and it's a godly thing, then we should step in and we should be obedient and do his will and not our will. So I think it's a blessing. David was blessed. I mean, he went through some hard times. You know, the Bible tells us we're going to have trials and tribulations, just like we go through hard times. But he was able to be successful in what he did. And so we have to stay true to the path.
Right, right. Yeah, and I agree with that because I also was kind of thrown into some things, for me, seminary. Like I never had a desire to go to seminary like that. In my undergrad, I was okay with getting a minor in biblical studies, and that was so I never imagined that the Lord would call me to go to seminary. And especially the first couple years, I went kicking and screaming and really just complaining. And, eventually I kind of developed a love for the process. So it really does depend on your mindset and how your foundation as well. For me, it's the sovereignty of God. So since I know that God is sovereign and any decision that he makes is far better than any decision that I can make, that helped me find solace in just going through this long process of getting through seminary. And so when I first started, I said, okay, I have 5 years to go. That's such a long time. I don't know if I can do this. And now I'm down to a year. I got 3 more semesters to go. So I'm like, okay, Lord, I see you working in this. And I actually see myself growing as a person. So, your mindset has a lot to do with your ability to cope and really engage in the thing. So what about you?
Yeah, I definitely think that when you find yourself like thrown into anything, I still think that there's always something that's tracking of where God has already been trying to take you. And that if he throws you in it, he's going to give you the grace to get through it. It kind of makes me think about like being thrown into being a caregiver for my uncle, like maybe a year and a half before he passed. Like nobody ever technically expects to be a caregiver, and you can be a caregiver on different levels. And like my uncle was at like that terminal level. So being thrown into that, not having any experience, but just me naturally being a caring, a nurturing person of like wanting him to be comfortable as he could be, and just kind of like, the grace, much patience that it took, and the guidance, and having those moments where I would cry, but it was like even in those moments, God would send a wind or some kind of compassion or something to just kind of like, steady me in it, because it did come very unexpectedly. And I'm like, God, I'm like one of the youngest nieces, like why me out of all my family members, So it's like him allowing me to go through that to build my own character in that, of like having to take care of someone who can't necessarily function for themselves, and even just the ability to be there for my uncle in his passing days and just be a light even in that. And somewhere in that, I'm sure God had his own purpose, and just being, grateful that I was a part of that before he was, he passed away. So if God puts you in it, he's going to guide you through it. He's going to it might not be easy, but I do think that there's a certain level of like grace, and there's always something aligning with where he plans to take you, and enduring through that and building your strength.
Yeah.
That's very true. That is very true for all of us.
I agree with that, because I didn't think any of, actually in my undergrad, I didn't know that the school that I chose was a Christian school. So the minor in biblical studies was like an added bonus. So I agree with, God, he kind of gives us glimmers of what he wants us to do along the way, but we don't always see those things until
And
maybe.
it's not always the big things either. It could be just the little tiny things, like just, out seeing one of your neighbors and encouraging them, or, seeing a little kid on the street and asking if they need help, or just, any little thing is part of life that you can help somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I have one last question for you.
Okay.
this particular story, I See Me, Jonathan's talking about how he saw himself in David.
Mhm.
That one of the reasons why he was so attached to and so fond of David is because he reminded him of himself. And so
Right.
I think there's a time where we all might feel that, we are.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. So the question is about mentorship. So do you think that mentorship is important? Do you have a personal mentor or someone who mentors you in an official capacity or an unofficial capacity?
So I think mentorship is very important, especially if you're new to the church arena. I think someone, an elder or someone who's been there for a while, should step up to the plate and help lead you and guide you if you're open to that. A lot of times people aren't open to that. And so it's a fine line that you have to walk. I don't personally have a single mentor or somebody who does it in a capacity where I've asked for a mentor or stuff like that. But I do have friends who are Christian, who I surround myself with, who they do correct me. They try to help me. I don't always receive it very well, but they're there, and I do respect them enough to hear what they have to say and to try to adhere to what they say, even though I might not say it at that time. I do think about it and go back. And it is important to just listen to people, and let them, feed into your life. You have to be careful of who's doing it all the time or who's around you all the time. But I think it is important for you to be able to, as the saying go, eat the meat and throw away the bone.
Yes. Absolutely.
Because, and then you have to, if you ask somebody to be your mentor, I think it's very important that you make sure they're doing it out of a pure heart and out of a pure way, because sometimes people have ulterior motives and it's not always pure. And so you want to just make sure that you're prayerful that this is the person that you're supposed to be going to mentor. And then my thing is, for how long are they supposed to mentor you? Is it just a season? Is it a lifetime? Is it just this moment in this one particular area? So there's a lot to consider in having a mentor. And then, if the person's available or if they have the time or capacity to even handle you and handle you right.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you say that, because I was a part of a training a couple of weeks ago, and the trainer, who I really admire, she said that she's not a mentor. She does not want to mentor anyone. And I thought she would be a really good mentor, but she says that that's just not her. She doesn't want to mentor anyone. And that's fair. That is fair. Just because someone has the capacity to do it doesn't mean that they should be assigned to you or that they would do it even. I know for me, like my personal story regarding mentorship, I developed a desire to have a mentor when I was in my 20s, going into my early 30s. And I asked a couple of people, and I got a couple of different types of answers. None of the answers were a yes, but I got a couple different reactions. And at first I was just like, why doesn't anybody want to mentor me? Like, grown-ups don't go around asking people to mentor them. So I didn't necessarily get that in a official capacity, but I do have lots of people in my life who I get, what I need from in an unofficial capacity. So
Yes.
people, like you said, in my life that I can go to for advice on specific things. And it might not be, no one person has all of the answers for me, but there are specific people that I can go to and ask questions about specific things. So, what's your mentorship experience, Alex? Or do you think mentorship is important?
I definitely think it is important that if you can find someone to be your mentor, whether that's spiritually or in other aspects of life as well. I think it is important, just because I believe in finding somebody who's been there, done that you can glean from and understand. Like, if you know somebody, some stuff you don't have to necessarily experience, like they can kind of help guide you through it, and I can appreciate that. So I'm going to listen to you. If I've watched you and I'm like, hey, I've seen how you've led your life, then that's something that I can appreciate. But also I guess I have a mentor. I have a mentor. But what I think is funny is that over time, the dynamics of that relationship has changed. So when you're saying like it's seasonal, maybe in one season your mentor is like right there with you in the depths and in the nooks and crannies, but then as you go through some things, it might be time to like, back up, give you some space as you grow and different seasons of life change. So whoever you pick or whoever you feel like, God has led to be a part of that piece of your life, like definitely understand and like pray about it and be flexible about it, because it does change. And when I wasn't looking for a mentor, it just kind of happened. It fit. And in my mind, I think I did kind of have this idea of like, okay, mentorship, I guess it is forever, or like, I don't know. I didn't understand like the timeline of it, but I also have gone through it and realized that as the seasons change, so does that dynamic, but that person is still there when you need to like reach out and say, hey, I have a question, or I'm experiencing this, or I need you to pray with me today. Even if, it might not be, the everyday relationship that we had before, I know that that person is still like in my corner and available when I need them. So.
Absolutely.
And that's the blessing. That's a blessing when people want to help, people want to share, people want to open up. Just like with me working with you guys, Janine has opened up and helped with the editing of the book. Alex has been helping me with all the marketing stuff. And so, I listen to what you guys say, even though you're not in an official capacity like that, but we still have information that we can share to help each other.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that makes me think about how am I giving that back? Once you've been the recipient of mentorship, you should also give it, So I am the same. Like, I have people that I mentor in an unofficial capacity.
Right.
But it is something that I think you have to actively seek out, because most people are not going to ask for help, but
True.
Like in the story, Jonathan saw things in David which made him want to seek David out to help him and to give him guidance. And so I can see myself in that as well, that there are people that I, tend to gravitate towards to want to help or give advice or assistance, or just, be a listening ear.
And I think one of the things about the book too was with Jonathan and David. Jonathan knew his father, David didn't. And so Jonathan was willing to be that middle person to take the hits for David, so he didn't have to take what Jonathan had taken from his father. And so sometimes I think a mentor is there, or the person that's there to try to cover you and not let you get so many hits, because if they didn't cover you, you could be out there on a limb somewhere, and
Very true.
it's hard to return. So I think that's one of the good reasons for having mentors, either whether it's official or unofficial, but it's somebody who can cover you and help you and guide you.
Yeah, covering is very important, because you need it. Because sometimes we out here, we do some things, and we need that person to say, come on, come over here.
We're grown. Well, thank you so much for answering these questions. This conversation has been great.
It has.